Okay, so we are ready to start our fireworks Marie Greene 4-day knit along, which is super exciting. And so I'm back to my little planning sheet, right? My project planner that has all my gauge information. I've sketched out, not being the best sketcher, but I've sketched out the sweater as it originally is, and then the modifications that I plan to make. You also could always just like sort of cut out that the bit from the pattern and paste it in here. This one's a little bit big for it, but you could do that sort of thing if you don't want to draw it. And it's good to sort of know all of your initial measurements and then whatever you're going to change things to. So I have my initial pattern measurements right here, and then some of the modifications. So things to think about is B, right, which goes from just under the ribbing to your armhole break. That is actually not only the length of the yoke, but also your armhole depth. So that's going to be affected by how wide your neck is, right? As well as how long you knit. Because if you have this really, really high up neckline right here, that pulls the whole sweater up onto your shoulders, where this one with a wider neck is going to come down. So I can get away with a little bit lower or shorter bit here, as long as I make sure that my armhole depth is appropriate for my body size. And the joy of top-down sweaters is I can always try that on before I separate for sleeves and make sure I'm super happy with that length. So once I've done that, then I need to do my cast on. Because I don't want this wide of a neckline, I like to start, or this small of a neckline rather, and I want it a little bit wider because I'm going to be wearing this as a summer sweater. I want to start my cast on with a provisional cast on, which then allows me to come back and custom fit that neckline after it's all said and done. So I can make it wider or shorter. So I have found that the best place for me to start a pattern is at the first increase round. So I will pick the number of stitches that would exist after I had created that very first increase round. So I'm making the third one in, or the 41.2. So I'm going to be casting on 132 stitches. I will be casting those 132 stitches on provisionally. So a provisional cast on simply means that it is temporary. And in order to do a provisional cast on, I need the working needle I'm going to use. I need a crochet hook, and I need some yarn that is roughly the same weight. You want a smooth yarn, a yarn that's really easy to work with and really easy to undo. There are many, many, many ways of doing a provisional cast on. So if you have a way that is your favorite, then go for it. It's no big thing. I will show you my favorite, which is to use a crochet hook. And we are literally going to crochet around the needle. Oftentimes in the same method, the instructions will tell you to chain like 135 stitches and then pick up the back loop of the chain. But I find that very, very tedious and challenging. So instead, I go ahead and I put the slip knot on my crochet hook. The crochet hook stays in front of the needle and the yarn is behind the needle. And I am literally going to crochet around the needle. So I'm going to come up and grab the yarn and pull through and take my yarn to the back. Come up and pull through and take my yarn to the back. The very cool thing about this is you don't need to be perfect. You don't need to worry too much about, are all of my stitches consistent? Because this is going to be pulled out. And after we put this waist yarn on, the provisional cast on is 2 stages, 1 waist yarn, and 2, we knit 1 round with our working yarn. And that 1 round has nothing to do with the pattern. That is literally the cast on. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video since you don't want to watch me do this for 132. And I'll come back and just talk about doing that first round in just a moment. Okay, so I have my 132 stitches launched onto my working needle using my waist yarn. And waist yarn, again, is just, any yarn, similar weight, smooth. And I usually just go into my pile of leftover stuff. So once I've done, I've launched all of my stitches on. I had 1 little stitch just left there at the very bottom. And I'm just going to create a chain, roughly 1 inch or so long. This is not a super specific thing. but something that I can easily find. It won't get in my way. I'm going to pull that through, clip my yarn, and just pull it through again, and it creates this nice little tail. That tail is my beginning and end of round. So because I want to be able to cut this off later and know that I can easily unravel it, I'm going to start here. If I were to start here at the other end where that tail's not hanging down, then I would have to pick out every single stitch, and it's not as much fun, I will just say. So then I'm going to grab my working yarn and start knitting. So this is knit in the round, right? But we're doing this very first row on onto the provisional cast on. So we're really still just knitting flat. So don't even think about joining. Don't worry about that at all. And you're just going to just knit one row. And then we will come back and join it and just talk a little bit about how to get started after that. Okay, so I have my provisional cast on completed. I've done my waste yarn and my one row of my working yarn. And so now at this point, I'm going to be joining. And one thing you might be wondering is just that prior to this row in the pattern, short rows were worked, right? Well, we're just not worrying so much about that, because when we come back and pick up this neckline is when we're going to come through and work those short rows on the way back up. And the short rows, the purpose of them is to cause the neckline to come down. But we'll talk about that in detail when we get to the actual neckline. So I just made sure that my my little braid is all facing each other. So when I come in here to join in the round and work my first round, which is just a knit round, right? I can do that. And I'm going to show you sort of my favorite way to join on these, which is to take the stitch on the left-hand needle, move it over to the stitch on the right-hand needle, bring the right-hand stitch over the left-hand stitch, but you're not binding them off. You're just trading places. And by trading their places, you get this nice little join that is not going to pull apart. And yes, you do want to go ahead and add in a stitch marker there, which I usually do a couple of stitches later. I just come back in and grab a locking stitch marker for the moment. And we're going to go ahead and just start following the pattern. So hopefully that is all a little helpful to you and you are getting going, and I'll see you soon. Bye.